Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the show. Today we have a very special in-person episode going back in time with our friend Joshua Weissman. This episode was actually recorded many years ago, but sadly one of my computers died and the files went missing. But years later, I was able to retrieve most of the conversation and finally edit this show together. And since the original recording of this episode, Joshua has gone on to become one of the most renowned chefs in the world, with incredible viral cooking videos and a couple of best-selling cookbooks to his name. If you'd like to follow Joshua, and you'd be crazy not to, find him on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and the socials by looking for Joshua Weissman or by visiting joshuaweissman.com. And if you'd like to get free recipes and stay up to date about our next in-person events, masterminds, and live shows in Austin and beyond, sign up for my newsletter at abeljames.com. That's A-B-E-L James.com or abeljames.substack.com. All right, in this special in-person episode, you'll hear why Joshua turned down an offer to star on a reality TV show, Joshua's secrets to making the perfect old-school sourdough, why pro cooks don't even need to taste their food, why a good white wine should leave a little tingle on the tongue, and much more. Quick note before we get to the interview. The original highest quality microphone audio files didn't make it when the computer died, but I was able to save the audio from the video cameras themselves. So apologies in advance if it's a little less clear or the audio is a little less pro than usual. But with that said, I hope you enjoy this episode with the one and only Joshua Weissman. So, like the ABC show that I was on, like if there's a plane going over, you stop everything that you're doing in the competition for the most part.
Someone's like crying and you're stop crying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh my
it's
God.
Like save it for the,
Yeah.
And it's wacky how that works. Ours was filmed too quickly and the budget was too low to have too much top-down direction. Hence, I was able to come out of it relatively unscathed.
Yeah.
Because they don't want that. They want everyone to go down hard.
Some film company reached out to me to be part of a show. It was about like young entrepreneurs.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, that sounds intriguing. And then I found out it was a reality show and I was like, fuck that, no.
Right.
Because they're like, we want to be there in your most intimate moments. And I'm like, oh, you mean like when I have a bad day and I'm crying? Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
No,
and they want to put salt in the wound, get you drunk.
Yeah.
Until you just lose it on camera and destroy your reputation forever.
Oh, I had a bad day and I, got in an argument with my mom and now I'm the mom hater, or you know what I mean? Yeah, no thanks. I don't feel like.
And now they own your name and brand.
Yeah.
For the next.
Fuck. That was actually part of the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, the contract was like it was basically I'd have to release control of my social media.
Yeah.
And I was like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
Why would I do that ever? It's so messed up.
That is so messed up.
But it also makes good TV. So, I mean, it's like if they have full control over what they're doing, then it's going to make good TV.
Yeah.
Because then they can control every aspect of it so it comes out the way that they know is going to elicit some sort of response in their audience.
They think. But that's them assuming that they know better than the people who are watching on the other end.
Yeah.
That's them assuming that they know what people are going to want to watch. And I think if you ask most people if movies are getting better, big screen movies about superheroes, all the reboots and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure most people say no.
Yeah.
Like they're not making better stuff.
Yeah.
Reality TV is not getting better. Yeah, but they're not spending it in the right places.
Right. Well, they care more about the explosions. The explosions and like these really crazy visual effects that I guess are supposed to capture people in the moment of this giant building being flown into space or something. And that's what makes a good movie now. My dad being in the industry for so long, it's pretty crazy seeing some of the movies and TV shows that he's done in comparison to what they look like now and how they're handled now is very different. And it's really not been that long. We're talking about like, anywhere between 0 and 35 years. It's really not much time to make that much of a change. But also visual effects have increased so much ever since we've had all these crazy technological advancements with filming and cameras. And
a weird thing that happened with that is like it crossed a threshold where it's almost indistinguishable from reality or what's real, right? Special effects a few years ago kind of crossed that. Not in every movie, but in the 90s and the 2000s, everything looked squishy and kind of like gum. Fake. Like you can tell that it was fake. But then they just kind of nailed it. And so if everything kind of looks real enough, then it's not impressive anymore to see a bunch of stuff blow up. I don't think, because it's like you've seen that before, right? Or at least I feel like I've seen that before. I don't want to go to a movie and just have it blow up. What's weird is I'm so sensitive to sound, I think, just because I'm like that and have been a musician for so long, that I don't usually fall asleep in front of anything, but I fall asleep in movie theaters that if there's explosion going on, it's really loud, I fall asleep because I just like short out. I'm just like...
That's so funny.
And I was like, this isn't worth it. Yeah.
That's when you know you reach true badassery.
I guess so.
Your lullaby is explosions.
No, it doesn't feel like that. It's more humans aren't meant to listen to explosions for 2 hours straight.
Yeah.
Right? It's like your body is just, I don't want to shut that off. Like when that place burned down and I heard all the sirens and I saw all the, firemen and police, every time I heard sirens for the next few months after that, it was like, I heard it in a totally different way than I'd ever heard it before. And you don't want to untrain that, right? Because if like something blew up over there, I would want to not have that tuned out.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think also when you're putting yourself into an environment like that, which is like a shitty movie where everything's blowing up for hours, and then you just do that all the time, then it's kind of doing the same thing that drinking Coke does, or eating a Big Mac and fries, where it's shorting out your palate.
Yeah, just right? Like desensitizes you over time.
Yeah, you're totally, or a bunch of disgusting porn.
Yeah.
Right? It's like hard to appreciate what's pure if you're ruining your psychology with all this cesspool of crap. Or even, I think of mediocre stuff in kind of the same way, right? Like, it probably offends you when you eat a mediocre meal to some degree.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like you'll eat it because you have to, and you're young and you get by or whatever, you appreciate food, but at the same time, it's like, this should all be better than it is, right?
Well, it's because I think that also has to do with where your standards lie. So, I mean, for you as a musician, if you, let's say there was someone that you loved in the music industry that you listened to all the time, you decided to go to one of their shows and you spend $100 on a ticket and they fucking suck live.
Yeah.
It's like almost a disgrace to you, because it's like, you're like, well, I worked this hard to do this and to be this good, and why are you not at my standard? Do you know what I mean? Because you have this standard that you set for yourself, so you expect everybody else to be at least at your standard.
Right.
And if people exceed it, then that's even better. And then that's where people come in to be idols and people that you appreciate and respect because they're above that standard that you already have for yourself. So it's like you set that bar. And when people fall below it, it's like our brains just can't comprehend why that's even happening.
It is weird.
Because it's like, I've been to a couple restaurants where I spent way too much on a meal, and everything that came out I was not happy with whatsoever. I didn't send it back, and I didn't ask for my money back because I'm just not that kind of person. But deep down, it was like super disrespectful to me, because it's like I would go out of my way to make a meal good for, even if it was for one person, let alone a restaurant. And if someone else isn't doing that, I'm just like, why are you guys even in this business? You know what I mean? Go into another business. I'm not going to like shit talk who you are, but I am going to say maybe you should look into doing a different business if you're not going to care about it, Yeah. Because going into the restaurant industry, the rate of return is not very good.
No.
So that's why it doesn't make sense to me, because it's like you have shitty rate of return and you have shitty food. Why are you here? You know what I mean?
Maybe they're just drunk. That's the only thing that I've been able to... because we've been to a few places that we like in town, and when you go to a place that's super good, it's that way in your mind. So every time, like you just said, if you go there and it's not, you're like, oh crap, that changes it in my mind, right? Because like if you have a crappy or just a mediocre meal at a place where it's expensive and you're used to eating really well, because that's what that thing is, then it's not that thing anymore. And the only way that I could rationalize it in my head is just like, oh, they must be drunk. Because a lot of times, like restaurant, it comes with the territory. As a musician, I'm basically bar staff, or at least I was friends with bar staff and got to know a lot of cooks, caterers, chefs, and just like people behind the scenes and all that. And there's a lot of fun that is had behind the scenes, and a lot of misery too. And some people are, on both ends of that and get carried away. And they also are usually trying to appeal to the drunk palate. So it's different eating when you're totally sober, compared to when you're having a great time, deeply engaged in conversation, not totally paying attention too.
Sure.
That makes a big difference too.
Sure. I mean, I guess to me, if I'm going to a really nice restaurant, for everybody's experience, it should be, and when I say really nice, I mean like really nice. So Uchi, Uchiko, Barley Swine, really nice places, or a Michelin star restaurant. It should be to the point where when you're having a conversation, the first bite of food that you take should detract you from the conversation.
Yes,
it should be the other way
agree.
around.
I
so
agree.
if it stops the conversation and someone has to literally stop and think about what they're eating right now, then you have succeeded. And it's really
that is a nice standard to have.
It's a really it's a nice standard, but it's also, you'd be surprised how simple it is to have that moment. It doesn't have to have 500 ingredients in it, and it doesn't have to be something that takes hours and hours and hours to cook. Some of the best dishes at some of the restaurants that I've worked at, you could make it home in like 30 minutes. You know what I mean? If you knew how to make it.
Right.
And so it's like, that I think is a really good, how do I describe it? That's a really good metaphor for the fact that if you just care enough, if you really honestly just care enough, it'll be good. You know what I mean? I think, because my standard isn't really all that high, because when I'm going to a restaurant and I'm going to eat there, a bad meal to me is a meal, is a meal that just wasn't, I ask for two things: cook it properly and season it properly. Like, put enough salt and make sure it's cooked enough. Like, not overcooked, not undercooked, right? Just in between, and make sure you put enough salt. I think that that's not a lot to ask for. You know what I mean?
No, it's not. I guess you kind of need to taste it though.
Yeah.
Unless you really have it down, right? Unless you really have a system, the chef would kind of need to taste it.
Well, everything. Right. Oh, you mean like tasting it before it goes out? Yeah, but then you couldn't taste it because it's going out.
Right.
That's where the talent and the repetition comes in, where like you've done it so many times that you shouldn't even have to taste it when you season it. You know, by the way the salt feels in your hands.
That's a true professional.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah, because that's why I'm not even close to that, because I will be trying my stuff the whole time. And that's kind of the fun of it for me. I like improving and just kind of, that's part of the learning, right? Seeing how that goes. But that's why it's so stressful cooking for other people, because it's just like, I can probably make a pretty good steak or two.
Yeah, but you're concerned about the season,
but like doing 10, forget about it. I can pull it off, but they'll all be like good maybe.
It's also, and it's definitely repetition. For me, it took me a while, but I've been cooking my whole life. So I would say up until about, because I've had that too, up until about 2 years ago, no, actually up until about a year and a half ago, I wasn't able to. And then a year and a half ago to present, I've gotten to the point where, when I'm seasoning something, whether it's with salt, olive oil, whatever it needs, it's like just by feeling it in my hands, like I could close my eyes and do it and know that it's enough, because you've done it so many times that you just know, and you also know what it looks like. So it's like visual and physical cues that you just keep in your mind. So I think people think it's this magic, like it's just, oh my God, the chef is just so incredible and talented. But in reality, it's like, it's repetition and understanding your system. So like when you pick up the salt and you season it, it's like, okay, that looks like it has enough salt on it. And lo and behold, it had enough salt on it. And so it's those visual and physical cues that you kind of get used to. And also when it comes to seasoning, depending on what it is, there's usually a point where like you have a threshold. So I don't think there's really such a thing as perfect seasoning. I think there's such a thing as over seasoning and there's such a thing as under seasoning, but there's like a little bit of threshold there.
Sweet spot.
Where like, it doesn't have to have exactly 99 granules of salt. You know what I mean? Like it gets to a point where like, if you stay between like, I don't know if I had to use a percentage, like if you stay between like 1.9% and 2.1% salt, you're probably fine. And there's a lot of room there. So when you're seasoning something, not everything's going to leave the kitchen seasoned the exact same way, but it will be seasoned properly. So I guess that's kind of one way to look at it and feel less stressed about it. Is like when you're seasoning a steak, it's actually kind of hard to over season a steak. You want to season a steak heavily because it just brings out more and more flavor. So you know that you have more room. So it's like, I went a little crazy on the salt there, but that's okay because it's still going to be good. It's steak. And then different for other things. I don't know. That's just one way to look at it so that you don't feel stressed, I think, when you're cooking for other people. But also, when you're cooking for other people, like I said, about when it comes to just caring about what you're doing, I think that should be enough to make you feel good. Is like, well, I really care about this meal and I care about the people that I'm cooking for. And and I care that it tastes good for them, and I feel good now because I know that I cared.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of happens. You know what I mean?
What about the physical heat level of food? Not the spiciness level, but like the temperature of food. How do you feel about it, generally speaking?
Like you mean for safety or for the sake of cooking?
For the sake of eating more than anything else. On the other end, because one thing that we notice a lot is that when we were on the road, kind of like when you get beer in London or even liquor or in a lot of places in Europe, no ice, not cold.
Oh, yeah.
It's all warm. A lot of food that we got abroad was not, it's like you don't get a hot plate of dinner like you do in America. It's just like we prepared the food that you ordered and here it is. And it may be like 10 minutes later or 20 minutes later or whatever. Well, maybe not in America, but is it? Like, how do you feel about it? That's how I wondered.
When I traveled abroad, I didn't really experience that. I maybe you just got unlucky, but if that happened over and over, I don't know, maybe it was a cultural thing. Where I went, that definitely didn't happen. Especially, I mean, in France, if you go in France, that should never happen because the French take it so seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, the French are kind of crazy about food, but I think temperature of food is important, but also not as important. If you get a cold plate of food, then that's too far. But also, like, I'm not really a stickler. If it's too hot, no big deal. If it's like just warm and it's like kind of cooled off a little, it's also not a big deal.
Yeah.
If it's cold and it's been sitting there for 30 minutes, then yeah, that's a problem. But I mean, for the most part, I think temperature is less important to me. I wouldn't mark down a restaurant just because I got a plate of food that wasn't exactly as hot as I wanted it to be.
What about like the realities of working in super professional restaurants and then actually eating as a 21-year-old in real life? Like, how do you marry those together in a way that makes sense?
What the comparison of working and eating in the same restaurant or?
I guess because it's so interesting because it doesn't really get better than where you're already at, right? You're already kind of at the top of where you would be preparing or eating food. It's like an expensive, very good restaurant, right? That's as good as it gets. But at the same time, you said before that it's like all about ramen. Right now, you're in your ramen. You're in your ramen years, which is totally true. It's like when I was in, when I was your age, I was still kind of living off of tuna fish and spaghetti and whatever I could scrounge up from like my parents' cupboard or whatever,
Yeah.
And those are different things.
Yeah, well, it's actually brought on a lot of inspiration for me for my recipes and content that I want to produce. Yeah. Because I've actually made a bunch of really fancy meals that I think a restaurant could totally sell for like $40 a pop out of stuff that, because I had no money that week. Yeah. I ended up making like a 5-star meal out of stuff that cost me like $5. Yeah. And so it ended up making me think, okay, well, maybe I can make this into like a series or something and get people to make fancy food for $5 and blow people's mind.
Dude, that's cool.
Yeah. And kind of like change the perspective of how people view food of like this mysterious thing and be like, oh, it's really that. Because I think it's really one of those things, because there's a lot of things that happen in life. I feel like people think because they don't know anything about it, they assume that it's difficult and mysterious. Yeah. But when you really break open the shell and look at it, you're like, oh, this is actually really fucking simple. And oh, by the way, cooking is in our DNA. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we, as a species, are literally meant to cook. You know what I mean? You know, because I'm sure you already know this, but I'll repeat it anyway. It's like cooking, increasing the ability for us to absorb nutrients in whatever we're eating. You know what I mean? If we eat something raw, we're not going to absorb as many nutrients as if it were cooked. And like, especially increasing the flavor of it and making it taste better. So we eat more of it and we ingest more calories. So from a biological standpoint, if we're not cooking, we're dying. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a little bit scary looking at society kind of moving towards, and I understand people are busy and we're becoming more and more busy, and it's gotten to the point where cooking is less important because we got to pay the bills. Yeah. And but you know, the irony of it all is if we lose that, then we're losing literally a piece of what makes us human.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true. It's like it's not different from what happened in the 80s, I think, with like tanning beds, right? Yeah. Which is like faking a real thing, and ab shocking belts. Yeah. And even the Thigh Master, because that's so
Thigh Master.
It's so overly reductive, right? that it's hilarious now, but we're doing the same thing. It's like people are shocking themselves and saying, it's like, this is way better than exercise. And,
wow,
you
that
know.
was great. That was great. Sounded like Bill Clinton.
Drinking Soylent or other shit like that and be like, this is way better than eating. And no, it's not.
Yeah.
There are times when you need to get by with less than ideal food, I think.
Sure, of course.
And it's nice to have MREs or something that you have prepared for emergencies or the equivalent of what a Cliff Bar was supposed to be or something, right? But
and I'm not claiming to be a saint or anything. You know, I if there have been plenty of times where I'll get home like I don't have time to cook. I'm gonna go somewhere else to go get something to eat, and you know I might go to the Chinese restaurant down the street, and I'm not gonna feel bad about it. It's just I think people just don't cook. Yeah. There's a difference between like picking your battles, and I think people just there is no battle. It's just they're just not cooking because they don't know how because it's too hard.
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah.
It's getting easier, actually, I think, because now you can find better ingredients in places that didn't used to have them.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, do you think the bubble is getting bigger or smaller? It's a weird time, right? Like the people who are getting healthier and the people who are not.
I think it's transverse. I totally think it's transverse.
Yeah.
As like actually no. I think okay, so let me see how I can describe this. I think as the bubble of the health community is getting smaller, and the bubble of the people who don't know anything is getting bigger because it's like this small bubble of community of people who are healthy and like are obsessed about health and fitness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They know like too much for their own good in a way. Do you know what I mean? It's like
it's true.
It's not just that they know things; they know so much that now we're entering a battle with orthorexia, body dysmorphia, and now they've gotten to a point where their healthy eating has turned into something unhealthy because they literally know too much. And then on the other side, there's people who almost know so little that they just don't even want to spend the time to learn it, so that they just pretend that they live in this world where they're like, "Well, I just don't know."
Yeah.
And then, but then they'll go.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. But they have all these other things that they care about in life, and in reality, this person is probably a very smart, intelligent person, but they're choosing to be ignorant of that.
Yeah, that's what it is.
And they're literally choosing to be ignorant because it is scary, because there's so much information, because there's so much dogma and people yelling at each other, and it's less about. I mean, I think if we just simplified it down and boiled it down to like, look, just fucking cook your food.
Yeah.
Just go to the store, pick something up that wasn't pre-made. Like, don't get anything. Don't get stock that's pre-made. Even if it's healthy, I don't care. Don't get it pre-made. Just get some fucking raw vegetables. Get some, if you do starches, get some raw starches, something that has not been cooked yet. No parboiled shit, nothing. No. And just take a day to go into your kitchen and figure it out. I don't care if you know how to cook. I don't care, because that's a BS excuse. Because I guarantee you, if I kicked your ass out into a forest, but I gave you a full kitchen, you'll figure out how to cook.
Yeah, you will.
You'll figure it out. And so, I mean, the reality of it is, like, I think if people just went and did it, they would find out that it really isn't such a secret, and it's actually kind of fun, and it's extremely therapeutic.
Yeah.
Extremely therapeutic. Yeah. And I think if more people had just one moment like that, it would literally change their life.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think people would have more interest in cooking, and then it would get to a point where people can start to venture out and just not even need a cookbook or a recipe. They're just like, I want to cook chicken tonight, and I know that off of all the recipes that I've tried, on average in the oven, whenever I'm roasting a whole chicken, it takes about an hour to an hour and a half at 400 degrees. I can remember that, and I'll do it, and then they do it, and then they suddenly learn, oh my God, you also don't need a recipe when you do it, and then it just compounds and compounds and compounds, and
it does.
Collective knowledge. And with access to the internet, people can figure out how to take apart and put a computer back together, but they can't figure out how to put a piece of chicken in a pan.
And kids are competing on cooking shows. They can make gourmet meals.
Yeah, like
adults who say, I can't cook. Come on.
Yeah, and you have MasterChef Junior?
Right, there are a ton of shows and spin-offs.
Is there more than one? I think there was just one.
Hell's Kitchen Kids or something. I don't know. But there were a bunch. Yeah. I remember because I was looking for one in particular, and I found like 8, and then I forgot which one I was looking for. I'm like, holy crap, look at all of these shows. God, we don't need all those shows. But whenever I get truly bummed out about something, I try to remember that dealing with humans is really just apes with noise coming out of their heads. It's no different than...
Well, it's like a battle between the two almost.
Yeah, it is. Because it is both at the same time. Like if we were out in the woods, and that's why we go on these crazy trips every once in a while, because he's like, you're in animal mode. And when you're in animal mode, then most of the people that you see are friends or fast enemies.
Yeah.
You know, and you've got to decide.
That's a really interesting point. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah. But that's what life is like too.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Fast enemies.
It's just you have to deal with a lot more of those interactions. And I can tell why people would just be like, I give up. It is what it is, because at some point it's too much for us to all deal with and be hooked into.
Yeah, and you have to compartmentalize, otherwise you're going to overwhelm yourself.
Yeah.
And I guess my whole mission and point here is really just because I think if we could just get people to realize to not be so scared of it, then it wouldn't be as stressful as they think it is.
Yeah.
That's the only reason that they're putting a wall up, is because they think it's stressful.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be.
Right.
Because there are things that are stressful that people do put walls up about. You know, income, paying bills, etc. That I can understand. But I think because of that, it's like sort of manufactured us to, as soon as we see something that could be stressful that we have the ability to avoid, we sure as fuck will avoid it, because it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's energy saving.
Right.
And you're gonna feel happier in general. So why not?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like one of those paradoxes where like the only way to fix it is if they do it, but they won't do it.
So we're sitting here tomorrow. You're gonna be fun. I
Oh,
like
yeah.
yours is kind of peachy.
Yeah, it ended up being a rosé by accident.
This actually is an orange wine, he said, which is basically where usually white wine is without the skins, but this is a wine where they put the skins in for a short period of time, I think. So it gives it it's a different type of flavor. It's almost champagne-y.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's nice and sweet and bright.
Almost a little bit bubbly too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
an action going.
Yeah, definitely probably from the fermentation in there. I feel like a good white wine should have a little bit of like tingle on the tongue. You know what I mean?
It should, yeah.
Because it's just indication that they actually took time to ferment it properly.
Yeah.
My sourdough starter.
That was so good, by the way.
Did you like it? Oh, thank God. So glad you liked it.
We ate it with my parents.
Was it good? Good.
Really
Everyone just was, yeah.
Thank you.
The best I've ever had.
Thank you. Who knew that bread was so complicated? I thought it was just like add some fucking yeast to it, mix it up, let it rise,
Yeah.
shape it, put it in the oven. It's not.
Well, that's what the bread machine companies told you it was.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I mean, the way that they make bread is just, it's not bread. It's literally not, by definition, not bread.
Right.
And remind me why that is. It's because they use kind of a commercial yeast, which does a different thing, right?
Well,
a few steps and
yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, yeast, for one. I mean, bread, to be honest, bread is just supposed to be naturally leavened.
Mhm.
Adding commercial yeast kind of takes away from the fact that I mean, I guess technically it's still bread by specific definition, but I think most.
the segment in yoga mat is still bread.
Yeah. And so, I mean, because you can have breads that are not naturally leavened, but
Yeah.
but if you look at history and you look at the way that we've made food, really, there's not been a lot of changes other than the fact that like bread is not being risen naturally. Because
Mhm.
if you think about it, when bread was first created, we wouldn't be rising it with commercial yeast. You have to have, if you want rise, you're gonna have to create life by making some sort of sourdough starter.
Yeah.
No matter what kind of bread it is, whether it's a sourdough crusty loaf of bread, or it's a pita bread, or it's whatever, naan, whatever, you name it.
Yeah.
Because that's technically a bread. Any bread that needs leavening, you got to have some sort of live culture to do it. I mean, we still do it with yogurt, you know. We still use cultures to ferment yogurt, so why are we not doing it with bread? But I think the most important thing of all, commercial yeast aside, because that's really just more of a purist mindset, but commercial yeast aside, my bread has 3 ingredients. It has flour, water, and salt in it. That is it. The only other ingredients that are in it are the multiple cultures of bacteria that I've cultivated in my starter. But in order to make my starter, all I need is water and flour. That's it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of beautiful in a way that you can create life with just flour and water.
Yeah.
But that's a different story.
Did you indoctrinate it though with fruit or anything like that? Did you?
No, you don't. Yeah, you don't really need to. Fruit. It's kind of funny because people think that if you add fruit, it'll increase the intensity of your ferment, which, you know, I've read a lot of contradicting information, and in my experience, it seems like, yeah, it gives it extra food, but it doesn't necessarily increase the intensity, because all that's going to happen is the yeast is going to consume it and it's gone. People think that it like pushes their ferment further, but it really, in my experience, has not. I've had the same results with fruit and without fruit, but you can just do flour and water and just keep refreshing it, and then eventually you're gonna have a starter. It's that simple.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing is it's like taking care of a child in a way. You have to feed it. I feed mine 2 to 3 times a day.
Wow.
Because it's so vigorous that it ferments so fast.
That's pretty
And so you don't want
Is that just the Austin climate, do you think? Is it because it just works better down here?
I think it's a combination of the climate, and it's also temperatures is a big thing, but it's also my inoculation percentage is really high.
Okay.
So like however much starter you leave in the bottom when you refresh it, because I'm sure you already know this, but like in order to feed a starter, you take your starter that's already been fully matured and everything, and it's done its rise, and now it's fallen because the gluten structure has been completely decomposed.
Yeah.
You throw away a certain percentage of it. So I leave about 20 to 25% in there, giving away my trade secrets right now. It's not really a trade secret. 20 to 25% of the starter left, that is your inoculation percentage.
Yeah.
That's pretty high. Some people drop it to like 10%. So you can control the speed of your ferment by really 2 main things: temperature or inoculation percentage.
Yeah.
Temperature, if my apartment was 85 degrees, it would ferment pretty damn fast. But because of climate control in apartments and houses, temperature outside isn't as effective to the final result as you would think. The only thing that is the humidity. But yeah, I mean, it's really just my inoculation percentage, I think, and the fact that my ferment has gotten so intense that it needs that, because I'm baking so often that there's even more yeast being released in the air. And if I didn't bake as often, it would probably, it's really weird. I can go on and on about this. There's so many variables that come into place. It's not just temperature, it's not just inoculation percentage, it's room temperature, dough temperature, water temperature, flour temperature. I mean, there's multiple variables to each variable. So it's like a variables within variables within variables, which is why some bakers literally spend their whole life trying to get the perfect loaf.
Mm-hmm.
They spend their entire life trying to get the perfect loaf, and some of them never get it. So it's like,
well, there is that much nuance.
Oh yeah, I mean there is that, and I mean it gets to a point where like maybe the obsession is a little too much, where it's like, all right, this is pretty close. There's not really such thing as perfection. Well, I want it to be a little more sour. All right, well,
We're humans. We're meant to do that.
yeah,
Right? We're meant, but at the same time, I think when we first started trying to make sourdoughs, we like had a good starter going for a while, and then we just accidentally baked the whole thing.
oh no,
Paying attention, just like all in there.
yeah, Yeah.
But I think we like took a bite and we were like, wait a sec. Oh,
yeah, that sucks.
that stuff like that just happens. Like when we first started making kombucha, some turned out really great, and then like a whole batch for no reason. Like we did everything right, but for no particular reason. One was infested by, I think you could see the worms squiggling around, like from the fruit flies. Somehow they got in there and laid eggs.
It's weird. Did you have netting over it or something, or?
Yeah, we had. I don't remember exactly what the details were, but maybe it was like cotton, but there was a little break in the cotton.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, and the one next to it got mold.
Yeah.
So you learn, but it feels like you got beat.
Yeah.
And it's a tough loss.
Yeah.
And the losses, that's what makes it hard, is the losses happen at the beginning, and you feel the worst about them at the beginning, because I think you almost feel when you're getting started with something like, oh crap, my kombucha didn't work out. I'm a bad person now. So I just can't handle making kombucha, or I can't handle making sourdough, And so like, what's the point in learning to cook? I can't cook because the last time I cooked, someone who I made macaroni and cheese for didn't like it.
Yeah. But
That's what it really is. They like follow it back to that emotional thing.
Yeah.
What do you think the secret is to unhooking that, to get people to just get over themselves and not care?
I mean, well, if you think about that scenario just in itself, it's the same thing of people spiraling down in any other situation. It's kind of like a baby kicking and screaming, where you're like, oh, well, I didn't get that job, and my wife is mad at me, and oh, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and then like you were like, why me?
Yeah.
But it's like the same thing in the kitchen. It's like you gotta identify that first and foremost, that you're making excuses, and then once you realize that you're making excuses, and actually, get out of your own way, I think the only way to really, really honestly, the only way to break the cycle is just to do it just once. Just do it, and actually don't do it like, oh, I'm doing this because I have to. Just do it, and like, don't be a baby about it. Because I mean, I've gotten to the point where I don't really want to be nice about it anymore because I think people kind of need a little bit of like, look, stop being a jackass and just do it just once and care about it. And try and actually be in the moment for a second. And I think you'll realize it's like you'll have like an epiphany where you're just like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then just do it like once a week. You know what I mean? Try and make a habit of doing it once a week, and then it'll get to a point where like you don't even have to try. You're gonna want to. I guarantee you that people are gonna get to the point where they're gonna want to, because like I said, it's in our DNA. And just like we're addicted to our cell phones, just like we're addicted to so many things in our lives, you're gonna have a massive. I mean, psychologically speaking, physiologically speaking, when you cook something and you taste it, you're gonna have a physiological response, which is a massive rush of dopamine in the brain, which is like you're patting yourself on the back for taking the time to cook. B, it actually tastes pretty damn good, or it's okay, and I'm actually happy that I did this. And then you're having all this positive reinforcement that's happening in your brain that you're not even aware of, and then that just like builds and builds and builds, and it becomes a dopamine cycle where when you're lacking it, you're gonna be like, oh man, I really want to cook tonight. I haven't cooked in a while. I really want to cook tonight. And once you've hit that point, I don't even think anything else matters. I don't care if you cook every single day. I don't care if you're cooking 5-star meals. It's just, to me, it means a lot just that you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's all that matters. You know what I mean? Because I think there's so many extremes, and everybody wants to be extreme about everything. The diet industry, the fitness industry, the cooking, or the restaurant industry. Oh my God, the restaurant industry is like, the restaurant industry gets away with things that if any other boss did that to you, HR would be all over your ass.
Yeah.
So everybody likes extremes, but I think when it comes to cooking, I think people need to start pulling their hands back and realizing that it doesn't need to be an extreme. And as soon as it's not, people will naturally fall where they need to be.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be regimented. It doesn't, you know? Otherwise, people will never want to do it. And then it just becomes a cycle of making yourself feel bad to do something. And that's not how, I don't want people to cook because they feel bad about it. I want people to cook because they want to cook, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of have to, like you said, compartmentalize a little bit on that.
Yeah.
You have to realize that we all go through different phases.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
you're not going to be playing high school football forever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not going to work out for you.
Right.
Like, or anyone in general. And at the same time, you're not always going to be interested in learning how to do French cooking.
Yeah.
Or how to like learn how to do a particular type of programming or plug in on the internet.
Sure.
Social media platform. We all have these bursts of inspiration. And you said before, it's like, if you're hungry and you're in the woods and you have ingredients and something to cook them with, you will learn how to cook.
Yeah, you'll figure it out
fast, and you also won't forget how to cook.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to make it hard on ourselves sometimes, I think, like you did when you had already experienced so much success in kind of like the independent blogging community and published your own cookbook also. And then you're just like, no, I can tell I don't know enough. I need to get abused a little bit.
Yeah.
Get out on
Yeah.
it. And that's what you've been doing for how long now?
So I've been doing the restaurant thing for roughly a year now. So I'm still pretty new to it. I'm still, I mean, like getting my ass kicked less, which shows that I'm improving, but also I don't feel finished with it yet.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's kind of like being, I went into the restaurant industry just because two things. A, I wanted to see if I could survive there. And I wanted that assurance, and I wanted to know that I could survive there. And B, I felt like A, I needed an ass kicking and I needed to learn more. And so that's really the whole reason, so that I can pursue, because my main goal is to teach people and get people excited about cooking and to be a source of inspiration for people to cook and, recipe production, etc. And I want to grow like that. But I think the best way for me to grow like that is to make sure that I feel comfortable within myself and my capabilities, because having been doing this at such a young age, I feel like I have more experience within social media, food photography, and writing than I do actually. It's getting to the point where like it's less about cooking almost.
Right.
And I don't like that.
It was more about documenting.
Yeah.
Because that's what we have to do.
Being a businessman and wearing my suit and you know what I mean? And like make sure that you're creating good relationships and make sure that you're keeping those relationships cold or hot and not cold. You know what I mean? And it got to the point where like I felt very robotic about it. Yeah. And it's like, this should be about the
head fast enough, Joseph.
Yeah. Well, I want it to be about food. I want it to be about something that's inspirational and makes people happy. And I know it sounds
That's rare. That should not be rare, but that is super rare. So thank you for that.
yeah. Well, no,
Seriously.
I mean I'm very. My mom's like this too. I was raised around a lot of women, and my mom is very much of a feeling person. And so, like, if my feelings aren't in line with it, then I just can't do it.
Right.
You know. And so I don't want that to fall away from me just because it's becoming so business oriented. And of course, that's a part of it now. You know, I've learned to.
It always would have been anyway. It
Sure.
has to be. I never liked it. I never liked the business part. I could be good at it, but it's gross. It sucks. I don't like it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, and I have to deal with that. But
Sure.
you get over it, and then you just kind of, once again, compartmentalize it.
Yeah, exactly.
And for what it is. And then I think you do the math.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, when I moved away from home, I did the math all right. I sure did. Right out of my bank account. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I learned some pretty fast lessons moving out too, which, you know, I lost a ton of money.
Mhm.
And I think in a way, I mean, maybe I'm just saying this to make myself feel better about it, but also I do think that it needed to happen. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have learned.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, and I think this is the best way to prove myself that really is more about caring about what people are doing with food than it is about the money.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't spend a lot of time monetizing myself.
Right.
And so when I moved, I learned really quickly that I did not have enough income from my stuff to keep myself afloat based off of, I mean, procuring recipes with ingredients from Whole Foods all the time. And I guarantee you I spend more money than most people on food just because I'm always testing with it.
Yeah.
And so I learned very quickly that it was like, oh shit, I got to pay attention to the business side of this. Otherwise, it would have never came up, you know? But yeah, it's definitely, I think food for people is something that's very sacred no matter how they eat.
Mhm.
You know, even if they eat fast food all the time, it's still important to them. Because, I mean, you need it to live. But also, psychologically, there's an emotional connection to food no matter how you eat. Deep. So it's hard to change people. And so that's why I'm not really looking to change people.
Yeah.
I'm just looking to like add an element to their life. So I'm not asking people to change. I'm asking people to add an element to their life and see how it does.
Yeah.
And most people that do that, I think, will change by themselves. I don't even need to ask people to change because it's just
Like something clicks.
yeah, it's just exactly. It's just like we have this. It's like we have this piece of our brains that is asleep, and then as soon as you start cooking, and that thing fucking turns on, and you're like, oh shit, I care about this, right? Fuck, I didn't know that, you know. And it's kind of cool how that because that happened for me. You know, I've cooked my whole life, and so it's a part of my life. So it's hard for me to be like, oh, look at me. But I'll share one experience that I had was when I moved away from home. In addition to finances being an issue, I mean, I was cooking significantly less. I was cooking probably 70% less than I had ever had ever. So if I don't want people to think that like I've never faced a moment where I, you know, well, this kid's been cooking his whole life, so he doesn't know how busy I am. Well, when I moved out of my parents' house and I was living here and I continued doing what I was doing, I lost money so fast that I was like, oh, where's rent? You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's good that it happened to me at 21, but or at the time 20. And so I went through and still kind of am going through where I have to like watch what I'm buying, watch what I'm eating, and sometimes I got to go and like get something super cheap that I don't want to buy and I don't want to eat, but I got to do it because where is the money going to come from? You know what I mean? And I didn't cook it, and or I need to spend more time making money this month, so I don't have time to cook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've been through that and I've done that, and so I understand where people are coming from, but I still was able to find time to cook despite all of that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think that I know that there are people like most people, and by most people I mean probably everybody has time to cook.
Right.
You know, like if the president has time to work out, I feel like you should have time to cook. And The Rock cooks, and he's pretty busy, dude.
Yeah, because it's a part of being human, and because if you lose that, then you just what do you have anymore? What's the point?
Yeah.
Like imagine if you don't have time to cook because you're struggling so hard with money.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you do reach all of your goals and suddenly you're not struggling with money anymore, what are you going to do if you don't need to do anything with your time?
Yeah.
Because if you don't cook then, then you'll be really depressed.
Yeah.
Because like you won't be able to afford to worry about how little money you have because you have a bunch, so you can't worry about that anymore. And that's one of the interesting things that happens to humans is they keep like getting the things that they want. And it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, I thought I wanted that.
Yeah.
Now I'm just going to go ahead and worry about this thing instead.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I mean, being busy also, it kind of stays the same because the more money you make, the more busy you're gonna be because you need to keep up the income that you have. So if you're poor or you're going through struggle and you need to pay the bills and you're working your ass off to do it, and I know a lot of people are doing that and are going through that. If you can't find time to cook in those moments, then you will never find time.
Right.
Because I guarantee you, when you're making more money after going through those experiences, why would you want? Oh, I need a break. Well, oh wait, let me think back to a year ago when I was really struggling. I don't want that again. Well, let me work harder.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like you have this empty shell, which is the dough, and you are literally breathing life into it.
Yeah.
You are literally breathing life into it. And the other thing is, and I this is not a direct, you can't quote me on this. This is actually from Michael Pollan on, I don't know if you saw the Netflix Cooked. Amazing.
So good.
Air was my favorite one about when he was talking about bread. And he said something along the lines that like, it's a perfect staple to represent how badly we need food in a primal sense, you know, like fighting for your life food. Bread is such a perfect thing for that because you're taking something that is this much and you're making more out of it with nothing.
Yeah.
With nothing. Because with the leavening, you're taking when I'm starting out my bread, the dough, there's about this much dough. If I were to roll it in a ball, it'd be about this much. Your loaf was about this big, right? It makes 2.
Wow. How much does it cost you, would you say?
Per 2 loaves, I would say probably like 50 cents a loaf. Almost nothing.
So if you were to buy that loaf,
I could sell it.
it was like this big, right?
I could sell it for like $6 probably.
I bet you could sell it for $20 at some farmers market.
Oh yeah, totally. But I wouldn't do that though because
Well, I'm not saying you, but here's what
you could.
Say.
Oh,
People
absolutely.
who say that they don't have time to cook, they don't have money to cook. It's like you can get like if you were to get that at a restaurant, you would get 2 slices of it on an egg sandwich for like $15.
Oh yeah, and the eggs cost them like 10 cents.
Yeah, exactly.
They're making a ridiculous. But yeah, absolutely.
You see where I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
Like you take this 50 cents and then a little bit of your raw talent or skill that you've built up over time because you've learned how to do this. You take that 50 cents and all of a sudden, not like you're going to like start a bread business necessarily.
Right.
Necessarily.
Thought about it.
But you don't need to buy bread now.
Yeah.
And neither do your family or friends. And all of a sudden, you're the person who is like giving that to the people around you. And I remember when I was a kid, when someone like first explained what bartering was to me. I think it was around the same time that I figured out what money was. And money is just like this cold hard cash, right? That you exchange. Where it's like, and they told me, but what it used to be back in the day is, you know, Farmer John would give his wheel of cheese to Farmer Eric, and he would take the bread. And it's like that exchange of craftsmanship and humanity is a powerful thing that we've kind of lost, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Like money doesn't really mean anything. It's so weird because now you go to the farmer's market, and the one in Austin anyway, it's like you can slide your credit card if you want to, and it's weird to do that.
I mean, we have one place in Austin, or a couple places in Austin that make pretty good bread.
Yeah.
Easy Tiger, most of their bread is naturally leavened, so I think that's really respectable. But the crazy thing is when people swipe their credit card, like you said, oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a good spot. It's like when people swipe their credit card though, and they're holding this thing in their hand, this bread.
Yeah.
It's like they have no idea what they're holding in their hands. You know what I mean? They have no idea because this thing literally had a lifespan in the sense of like there were so many things that happened that led up to this. Like the bread that I gave you, I mean, I could have been one time I made bread for somebody and this wasn't your loaf, but this was a separate loaf, and I had a horrible day that day, but I really wanted to get them their bread, and I don't remember what happened, but I was like in a terrible mood, and then like something set me off and I just started crying, but I kept making the bread, and when I gave them the bread, I immediately thought of that moment, and I was like, they have no idea what I went through while I was making this, and I feel like in a way that almost affects the complexity of flavor. And it was the best loaf that I'd ever produced, which is the crazy thing. And I was like in a state of emotional distress while I was making it. And so it's like there's so much like energy that went into that from me, and energy that went into that from the starter that I created that's been alive for a year and a half. And so many events have happened around it to make that. And it's like this beautiful complexity of things that have happened that has led up to this one loaf of bread. And that's why it's such a beautiful representation of what food is supposed to be, because it's something that takes so much time, and that when you give it to somebody, they're completely unaware of what it is. But the crazy thing is, like you said, you enjoyed it so much, is like they love every second of eating it, and they don't. It's almost like you don't even understand why it's so good.
Right.
But then when I explain everything that happened that led up to it, then suddenly it's almost less about the ingredients, and it's less about me. It's just more about the food and what has led up to make what it is.
Totally. Well, because food used to come with a story. It was prepared by people who you knew, people in your tribe, I would assume, or your family in most cases, right? And even now, when we do Thanksgiving, or when we have in the past, a lot of my family were farmers, or my grandfather was an organic farmer, and so like they all worked on the farm, and a lot of them learned how to do various things. If they didn't start their own farm at some point, they just kind of will bring, like Uncle Dean brings mushrooms that he learned how to grow.
Oh, it's awesome.
That he inoculated years ago that are paying off big time. Everyone brings their own pie, like the huckleberry and the that they hand gather in Nan's blueberry.
Right.
And
that's
my
awesome.
brother Mark learned, he has an organic farm, learned how to, on other organic farms, because he was kind of, they call it interning now, but that's not what they used to call it, right? It's like
a trade.
It's a trade, and you're learning from different tradespeople and learning how to do different things. And he literally had a wheel of cheese. It looked so big.
He made it.
That he made, yeah.
Oh my God!
Making a bunch of different cheese for a long time, and just had it was something that I could tell when he like showed it to me. He was proud, but he was so over it. Like he has such a glut of cheese that he's over.
He's over cheese.
Probably like overbred to some degree.
Yeah.
Like, you've had enough. Like, I don't want to eat this anymore. I want to share this with people.
Exactly.
And that's the thing.
I don't really even.
It's so special, because then it's like the craftsmanship and the art and the spirit and everything that went into that trade and making it that good is the story that made it so special when we ate your bread that you gave us with my family, right? It's like, this is what it's about. This is what it's supposed to be about the whole time, because what we all really want, I think, is meaning in our lives. And if you have meaning in your meals, then that's actually kind of a shortcut.
Yeah.
Because when we had Thanksgiving, when my brother brought the turkey that we had literally met, that he had killed and, drained all the blood out, plucked all of the feathers off of it and all of this. It's like when he puts that on the table, and by the way, he also cooked it for us. It's like, how different is that?
Oh my God.
Butterball.
Right.
Or like fried chicken or a pizza.
Yeah. It has a story.
It has a story, but I think we know what the placebo effect is, and we're like, oh, the placebo effect is just like magic or something. And we don't know why it works, but when you take a sugar pill, 30% of the time it does whatever you think it will. And I think that maybe that's a way to hook that up and make it work for you, because we all want to believe that this matters.
Right.
When you eat a bucket of fried chicken, you don't believe that.
Oh my God, no. Well, it's also like the mindless eating thing. Remember how I was talking about earlier, if it detracts you from the conversation, it's good.
Yeah.
So I've had this happen with a couple of my friends, and that's a big reason why I like to share food with people. But it's like whenever you're eating a bucket of fried chicken, you're just eating. Like, you're not even paying attention. Yeah, you might be like, oh, this tastes good, but like you're watching your Netflix show, Game of Thrones, and just shoveling and shoveling and shoveling. And like, you really, to be honest, you don't really care about that. If that fucking fried chicken fell out of the window, you wouldn't give a shit.
Yeah.
But everybody has this, no matter how fancy, rich, poor you are. Everybody has this. And it gets to a point where like you will have something that you do, if it stops you in your tracks and you are thinking about it, that's it. You know what I mean? That's that moment that that people don't have anymore because they don't have any more. They're not having food that is making them stop and think about it. It's different than stopping and thinking, "Oh, this is so good." It should actually evoke some sort of mental physiological response from you. It should, and there is a way to do that, you know. And bread is a great way to do it. I also think it's about people wanting to be understood. I want to be understood, and I want other people to experience when I'm because I'm so passionate about food and I love food so much that when I eat something, it's like, fuck, I love this so much. I want other people to feel what I'm feeling. How am I going to get them to feel this? Oh, I'll just make it for them, and maybe they'll have the same effect. And every single fucking time, I make it for them the same way that I made it for myself. That made me feel like that, and then I get to see someone else or hear about someone else having the same experience that I did. It's mission accomplished. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like baking the bread for you guys and having you guys share it and hearing that you guys loved it so much is like that. There we go. That's it. That's all I wanted. That's all that I wanted was for you to have the experience that I did. And that's the whole point. And so it's a really cool cultural thing that happens too.
It is. You know what's so weird about that too is that like, and I think my wife Allison would agree that if someone came to us with like $100,000 or $1 million, that one 50-cent loaf of bread meant so much more than anything like that ever could, because it like locks it into place. It makes that thing click. Right. Where in the same way that like when my brother Mark brought his turkey that we met to Thanksgiving, you're like feeling so many things at the same time. You're like, thank you. What does this mean? Oh my God, that was just alive. It's dead now. It smells delicious. I think I'm going to eat it.
But I also feel kind of bad.
I feel bad. Like, thank you. I am not going to eat too much. You're not going to do like the gluttonous paleo thing.
Yeah.
If you have met your turkey or chicken or cow.
That's a really great point.
Same thing with, like, I recorded some podcasts a few years ago with the cows, like, sitting behind me, who we became friends with at my parents' place in New Hampshire, who we later ate.
Oh, my God. That's intense.
Burgers, liver. I think we might have even eaten the tongue of those ones, but that was the plan all along. It was, you know, it sounds super dark, right? But how many people who are listening to me say this right now who feel weird ate meat today?
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
Exactly.
Probably way worse because those cows and those chickens were raised in horrible, disgusting conditions that you would never wish upon anything that has a life.
Yeah.
Right.
And people like to put up the blinds like, oh, no, I don't see it, so it's not happening.
We're conditioned to, and it's easy.
Yeah.
We want to because it's hard.
Yeah. Well, you got to protect yourself a little bit. You got to protect your mental health.
But it also, if with the bread that you gave to us, it's like, wow, this is so much at the beginning. It's too much for us, but it's going to expire in a few hours, right? Like it's degrading. It's alive, but it's degrading. So we need to share this as quickly as possible. With this.
There's some urgency to it. Yeah.
And food isn't built like that anymore either. And so there were like so many lessons that I learned from that loaf of bread. I just want to thank you for that.
No, of course. Yeah. It makes me so happy to hear that you guys enjoyed it so much and that it had that effect on you, because that really is the goal. And I mean, it's funny because like you said, the point that you made about being over it, totally over bread. Mm-hmm. I almost never make it for myself anymore.
Right.
It's funny. I didn't even think about that. It just hit me that I almost never make it for myself anymore. I make it often, probably 2 or 3 times a week, but 99.99% of the time that I'm making it for other people. Right. And if it's going to be at my house and I'm eating it, I'm just doing it because my girlfriend wants something, or or my roommate wants something. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's like, it's funny because I believe all these things, but every single day I learn something more about. It's just like it's almost like it just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper to the point where it's like politics of food don't matter. You know what I mean? The physiology of food doesn't matter. It's like you realize that there's this like deep-rooted emotional, almost spiritual connection to food that I think is so deeply ingrained in everybody that everybody has it. It's just that it's kind of like covered up by all the physiological bullshit that people have created.
Oh, we can make this as surfacey as we want to.
Yeah.
You know? People do that all the time. It's obvious. But I think in getting deep, that's where people really feel that making that lifestyle change is actually worth it.
Sure.
where what you put on your plate means something. Because I think the reason that you actually got results and changed and grew in the way that you did is because you got that. You learned how to do that meta thing, not like, I want to have abs, right? Or it's like, big muscles and look cool so I can get laid. That sucks.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, you can see how it would happen and why it would.
I mean, I've been there, and
Of course, but we all have the deeper part too.
Sure.
And that's the thing that has been coached out of us by the worst part of society and culture, I think, that we need to remember that we still have, and we need to keep alive as much as we possibly can. Because whenever you say that you can't do something, if you're out on a camping trip or you're out in the woods for just a couple of days, and if anything got real, if you go into survival mode for a second,
oh sure,
you'll be like, I can do anything right now. It's like
if I need to do it,
keep alive.
Yeah.
Like this, and we're weird because we're in that, or it's strange because we're in that weird in between spot where it's like, I'm about to die. Everything matters. I'm going to do exactly what I need to right now and learn what I need to survive.
Yeah.
And like nothing matters. Everything's cool. I got whatever I want. And then just like, I'm totally stressed out by traffic, my phone, text messages. You're stuck in the middle.
Sure.
Where we don't have that recalibration. How do you think, or why do you think you have that? Did you just start early enough for things to click?
You mean having the ability to
kind of see what matters, I guess. You're older. You're an old soul, is what like someone who was old would say to you.
Sure.
You're ahead of your time a bit. It seems like you have a lot of understanding about what means something to you.
I think it's because I was sort of forced to.
Yeah.
Most people are not forced to think that way, but I was unintentionally forced to by the experiences that I've had leading up to it. And seeing deeper meaning in things. If I wasn't able to do that when I was in school, I probably would have fucking offed myself. You know what I mean? Like you have to, because I was at a point, and I don't want to play like pity party or anything, but I mean I was definitely at a really low point because I didn't have a lot of friends and kids were making fun of me so much that I just had to find a way to see the deeper meaning in things.
Right.
And I think that sort of started the cycle. And then when I had spent time losing weight, and I feel, I don't know, it's really hard for me to explain. It's not so much that I can pinpoint a time that it can happen. I'm just kind of trying to review my life as a whole and see if there's anything that's happened. I mean, I think that's a big contributor to it. I think being a cook, because I know a lot of different cooks, and by cooks I mean people who cook professionally, and some bloggers that are actually not passionate about blogging, but passionate about food and cooking.
Yeah.
I think that's also a common thread among people who like to cook, is we're a little bit ridiculous in how emotional we are. You know what I mean? We're almost we're almost kind of like a little bit, we're a little too poetic, where people are like, all right, come on. I mean, like, it's a fucking potato chip. Okay, calm down.
Right.
But it's almost like we go out of our way to see the beauty in things, which I don't think is a bad way to live, but also or really any creative, I guess.
Yeah.
Anybody in the creative artistic realm is going to have that, is going to kind of need to be a little weird like that.
Yeah.
You know how the classic saying goes with like a contemporary artist always being like so strange and wearing his funny glasses and being like, this art piece makes me...
so many different funny glasses just like in our
shot, right?
Right?
Yeah, and you're just, and I feel like you're like that too, is just kind of going out of your way to see the beauty in things, and also just kind of once it happens to you enough, you realize that there's a deeper meaning in literally everything.
Yes.
Literally everything. So then when you start to look for it, you start seeing it, and then you can't help but have that be a part of your life in everything that you do. And then suddenly everything just starts clicking. The way society works, the way politics work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the way why things happen. And I think most people could realize that they're just too deep into their way of doing things all the time, the flow of things, that they can't see it because they're too covered up by everything. But they have the ability to. It's not like, I don't want people to think that like you or I are cut from a different cloth. I feel like it's definitely like a human thing to want to do that. It's just like,
it's more about like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And the same thing with negative things. If you're looking for a problem, you'll find a problem. If you're looking for a problem in a relationship, you sure as hell are going to find plenty of problems. If you're looking for a problem in the way you eat, you're going to find problems, you know? And so, yeah, I think it's the same thing, what you're looking for. I mean, I have plenty of friends who are my age that are scared and conditioned not to express themselves because of things that they see on social media and the way that, you know, their friends will make fun of them if they get deep. Like, because I am the way that I am and I'm just like, look, I'm deep, fucking deal with it, then people are like, oh, Josh is so cool when he says deep stuff. But if someone else did it that was the same age, a different part of the friends group, they would be chastised for it.
Right.
Because, oh, dude, you're weird. Chill out, man. You know what I mean? And it's kind of, and so it's like weird. It's like in our society, it's like you can't have feelings. Don't feel these things. I know that's kind of like a meta way to look at it, but in reality, I mean, it's kind of how we've pressured ourselves.
Yeah, and the problem is, I like what you're saying. I felt when I was young like you as well, but it's like things have gotten way worse in the time that I was feeling kind of the same way. And it's like, how do you deal with that? Like, what, man? Because I've been like, a lot of people have been railing against the world getting like turning into more of a cultural cesspool where no one cares about the things that matter. But like, really, what if you know, you're having this conversation with like my kid, right? 10 years, 15 years from now or something like that. Hopefully it doesn't get that much worse.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do we actually turn this around is what I'm wondering as we talk about this.
Right.
You're totally right. And I 100% agree. But like, I wish it had gotten better, not worse.
Right.
In the time that I've been working, that a lot of us have been working so hard to try to make it better.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's also like a very human thing to happen, though. I feel like, because in my life, I've definitely been the type of person where like I'll just make it as worse as I can until I'm like, all right, time to fix that. You know what I mean? And I do that with a lot of things, and I still do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I don't know if other people do that. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I think
you want to know what the thing is doing, and that's the only way to test it.
It's to let it get bad.
To kind of mix it out.
So I think in a way, maybe for what we're talking about, it might have to be one of those things where it has to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People have to get to the point where they're like, oh shit, my foot's falling off because I fucked up. You know what I mean? And then when people start seeing that more and more, people are going to finally start to realize, just like with, you know, our planet being totally destroyed by trash and the huge...
It's just...
You know what I mean? Like it gets to a point where like if it gets to a point where we can't ignore it, then you're damn straight people are going to want to change.
Yeah.
But if they don't see it, then they're just going to let it get worse and worse and worse. Right. People just don't. I mean, because of the internet and everything. To be fair, it kind of makes sense biologically because we never were really meant to see. I mean,
that's true.
To me, we weren't meant to see this much. You know what I mean? Like people usually stayed in the same spot forever until they died, and like now,
I understand it.
Yeah, now we can see stuff happening all over the world all the time, whenever we want, and so it makes sense that like we need to see it to believe it. It makes sense. It's like in our DNA, and I get that, and I think we need to see it to believe it, and so that goes for everything that's happening, especially with food. It's like people usually don't want to lose weight until they're overweight and sick and don't feel good. And then they're like, oh, now I want to do it. But they never stopped along the way to getting there because there's a long road to get to overweight, just as there's a long road to losing weight.
Yeah.
And so you have to get to the point where if you're going to see it in order to fix it. Yeah. And so I think for people with cooking, it may have to get to that point, but I think because of what we're talking about, I feel like that could speed up the process because now they're thinking about it already.
Right.
They don't need to see. So if it's already in their mind that they're thinking about it, then they don't really need the catastrophic moment for it to happen. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They don't need the ultimate catastrophic moment. It might just be a day where like they had a rough day, and this is a hypothetical. They had a rough day and they, you know, go into their house and they don't have enough money to go out, but they have enough money to pick up some lettuce and some oil and vinegar and some salt. I remember listening to that podcast. You know, I'm going to cook tonight. Fuck it, I'm going to cook tonight. And then it happens. Yeah. And then that's the moment that I was talking about, where it's like you just started the dopamine cycle, and now it's going to start. Now we're rolling the ball.
The craziest part of all that is I'm just thinking about this right now. It's like you could literally, if you wanted to, learn how to cook in a day.
Oh yeah,
right. It's like you could
the internet, dude.
You could if you took just a few hours to chill out. You had a day off, or even you were sick or something.
Yeah.
Just for whatever.
Oh my God,
reason.
yeah.
You could instead of binge watching a show, you could binge watch cooking videos.
Yeah, which is also fun to watch.
Yeah, totally fun and can be very entertaining. And if you start to think of food the same way that you have thought about bread, where you're over it, you've made too much, you make too much cheese, or you make too much of anything, it does something good for you, right?
Yeah.
Because like, especially I think when you first get into cooking, you think that every ingredient is so precious and you don't want to waste anything, and it like costs money, you don't,
Right.
and you're like, what if I screw it up? But you're gonna screw it up, and it's, if you do the math, you look at it, 40 to 50% of all food in America is wasted.
Yeah.
Not eaten.
Oh yeah.
I don't-
Yeah.
And it's going to be wasted anyway. It's not a good way to think about it, obviously. But if you're just getting started with cooking, I find that some people that's helpful, right? Where it's just like, look, all this stuff is going to be thrown away anyway. If
So
you
depressing.
do it up,
Yeah.
that's no big deal. But it's a shift in thinking where if you're providing for other people, then wasting a little bit of food that isn't up to the standard that it would take to feed them is worth it, because that's the service that you're providing.
Right.
Right. And I think it takes that step for people to get over. And that's a really tough one before they're okay with feeling like they can cook and they can own it, and maybe not be made fun of for screwing it up or something.
Yeah.
Because that's a big part of it too.
Oh yeah, and well, it's also that strive for needing to be that perfectionist mindset where it's, you know, you why would you waste money and mess it up for the sake of messing it up?
Yeah.
But it's also the simplicity of it is because of the internet and YouTube, and I mean, I think the margin for messing up a meal has been taken from here, because and then enter the internet. Now it's very fucking small.
It's on your phone.
It's literally, if you're afraid of the way that you put the chicken in the pan, look at the video. Okay, so he's laying it like that. Okay, here we go. Oh, I did it. That wasn't that hard. You know what I mean? If we can operate a motor vehicle, we can operate a stovetop. It's like it's not as difficult as people think it's going to be, and recipes are so specific that, like, if you follow it and you just do what it says, and if you have a question like the way that something should be cut, the way that something, like how you should hold it, go to YouTube and look at a video.
Hey, Abel here one more time. And if you believe in our mission to create a world where health is the norm, not sickness, here are a few things you can do to help keep this show coming your way. Click like, subscribe, and leave a quick review wherever you listen to or watch your podcasts. You can also subscribe to my new Substack channel for an ad-free version of this show in video and audio. That's at abeljames.substack.com. You can also find me on Twitter or X, YouTube, as well as Fountain FM, where you can leave a little crypto in the tip jar. And if you can think of someone you care about who might learn from or enjoy this show, please take a quick moment to share it with them. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.